I stopped breathing before I even heard the whole sentence. My heart just stalled. One person, one confession, and my entire life snapped in half. The future I'd saved for, the security I'd bled for, the one thing I can never replace. Gone, like it meant nothing. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just felt everything inside me go quiet, like someone turned the lights off. This was the person I trusted more than anyone, the one who was supposed to protect me, not destroy me. That loss hollowed me out. I buried the woman I used to be that night. And when I smiled the next day and agreed to meet my fiancé's family, I already knew what I had to do. I would show up poor. I would act naive. And they would never see what I was really there for. To understand why that one sentence broke me, you need to know who I was before it. I was the sensible one, the one with spreadsheets instead of daydreams. I woke up at 6:30, got the same overcrowded train into the city, answered too many emails, managed other people's panic for a living, then came home and managed my own. I wasn't unhappy, just busy. I liked knowing my rent was paid on time, my savings account was growing, my pension contributions were set. I thought if I was responsible enough, careful enough, life would be kind in return. I'd convinced myself I was almost there. Stable job, half-decent flat. A man who said he wanted the same things I did. Marriage. A home that was ours. Maybe children, if we were lucky. It all sounded so ordinary. That was the appeal. No chaos, no drama. Just a quiet, solid life. I told myself I was lucky to have my fiancé. He wasn't some grand romance. He was safe, predictable, the kind of man who remembered to put the bins out and sent me a text if he was going to be late. He didn't shout. He didn't slam doors. After growing up walking on eggshells around my parents' arguments, that counted for a lot. We built our life in small, practical steps. First, toothbrushes at each other's places, then drawers, then the conversation about moving in together, which was mostly about how much we'd save on rent. When he proposed, it was at the end of a long Sunday walk, my hands cold, my feet aching, my mind already on the work week ahead. The ring wasn't huge, but it was paid for. That mattered to me more than any diamond. I trusted him in the way you trust someone you've slowly folded into your routine. He knew how I took my tea. He knew which side of the bed I couldn't sleep without. He knew my PIN numbers. I knew exactly how he took his coffee and which shirt he'd reach for on a Monday morning. That kind of familiarity feels like truth. You stop questioning it. There were early signs, if I'm honest. Small things I pushed aside because they didn't fit the story I wanted. The first time was when he made a joke about my humble beginnings in front of his friends. Everyone laughed. I did too. Later, in the taxi, I told him it stung a bit. He said I was too sensitive, that it was banter, that his friends liked me. I told myself I was being uptight. He never quite liked talking about money either. Not really. He said it made him anxious. If I brought up savings or splitting things more evenly, he'd change the subject, or kiss me, or suggest we open a bottle of wine and not ruin the evening. But he always wanted to know how much I'd managed to put away for the deposit. He called it our saving, but it was mostly my spreadsheets, my cutbacks, my cancelled nights out. Then there was the way he talked about his family. They were proper old school, he said. Traditional. His word for it. He joked that they were a bit snobbish, but once they see how good you are for me, they'll love you. I didn't push. I just worried, quietly, that I'd say the wrong thing, wear the wrong thing, hold my fork the wrong way. Those were warnings. I filed them away under things we'd laugh about later. The day everything changed was ordinary, which somehow makes it worse. No big fight. No screaming. Just a Thursday, I think. I left work early because a meeting was cancelled, and for once I didn't tell him I was on my way. I remember being pleased with myself, thinking I'd surprise him, maybe cook dinner before he got home. Something small and kind. When I opened the front door, I heard his voice straight away. He was on the phone, in the living room, talking louder than usual. I could tell from the tone it was family. There was a different version of him he used with them. Sharper, more performative. I stood in the hallway, key still in my hand, the door not quite closed behind me. I know what I'm doing, he was saying. You think I'd be this serious if there wasn't a plan? I froze. My first instinct was to step out, let him know I was home. But something in his voice made me stay quiet. It wasn't how he spoke to me, it was how he spoke about me. There was a pause, his mother's muffled words, just a hum through the wall. He sighed. Mum, listen, she's good for now. She's responsible, she's saving, she's manageable. Once the house is sorted and things are in my name, we can think long term. I'm not marrying for love. I'm not an idiot. The keys slid out of my fingers and hit the floor. They sounded louder than they were. Metal on laminate. That tiny clatter cut through his words, and then there was silence. Hello, he said. Mum, hang on. Footsteps. The living room door opened. He saw me in the hallway, my hand still hovering stupidly in the air where the keys had been. For a second his face was naked. No charm, no softness, just calculation. Then it rearranged itself into concern. Claire, you're home early. He glanced over my shoulder as if checking whether anyone was behind me. How long have you been standing there? My mouth was dry. Long enough. We stared at each other. I expected shame, panic, some sign that he understood what he'd just done. Instead, he exhaled like I was the one being unreasonable. It's not what it sounded like. That sentence. That tired, rehearsed sentence. I almost laughed. He launched straight into it. He was just calming his mum down. She worried too much about him. He'd exaggerated. It was a stupid choice of words. Of course he loved me. Of course this was real. I knew what his family were like, didn't I? He just said what he had to say to keep the peace. He stepped closer, reaching for my hand. I pulled it back before he could touch me. I saw the flicker of irritation, quickly smoothed over. You know me, he said quietly. You know I don't mean things like that. Don't throw away everything over one overheard sentence. I should have left then. I didn't. Instead I nodded, numb, and let him talk. Let him fold me into his version of events, piece by piece. By the time I went to bed, my head was buzzing with his words, his apologies, his explanations about just the house paperwork, and saying the right things to get the mortgage through. He fell asleep quickly. He always did. I lay on my back staring at the ceiling, replaying that one line in my head. I'm not marrying for love. Every time I heard it, my stomach tightened. By 3 a.m, I got up, padded into the living room, and opened the laptop. If it was all just paperwork, then the paperwork would back him up. In the email thread with the mortgage broker, my name was there. In the subject line, in the greeting. But in the application form attached, under proposed ownership, there was only his. Deposit source, gift from parents. Not savings, not joint, a gift. From them, not me. The numbers matched almost exactly what I had in my savings account. My chest went cold. Maybe it was a mistake. An error in the form. I logged into my bank. The savings account I'd built for years, skipping holidays, saying no to dinners out, always choosing the cheaper option, was almost empty. A single transfer out, 3 days earlier, to his current account. I scrolled up. There was confirmation. Authorized. My name, my login. My fingers started to shake. He'd insisted on sorting the boring stuff that weekend. Handed me the laptop while we watched TV. Asked me to log in so he could double-check the balance before the meeting. I'd been half distracted, half flattered he trusted me with the process. I logged in, passed it to him, went to make tea. I hadn't watched what he did. When I clicked into my credit card, the balance was higher than I remembered, much higher. I opened the statements. There, sandwiched between supermarket shops and the odd online order, were transfers to his account. Regular ones, small enough to hide, big enough to matter. I pressed my knuckles into my mouth to stop the sound that wanted to come out. We'd consolidated some of his old debt onto my card months earlier because I had the better rate. His idea. Sensible, he'd called it. Teamwork. I'd told friends I was proud of us for being mature about money. He'd just kept going. Guilt slid in next, right on cue. I had agreed. I had given him the passwords. I had wanted us to be a unit. I'd been so eager to prove I wasn't like my parents, screaming about every pound, that I'd swung the other way. Too trusting, too accommodating. Maybe I'd pushed him into this. Maybe my obsession with owning a home, being secure, had made him feel trapped, less of a man. Maybe this was his clumsy way of taking control. I clung to those maybes for a few minutes because the alternative was worse. Curiosity is cruel. It doesn't stop where it should. I opened his messages. There was a thread with his sister. Recently. At the top, a photo of the two of us at a friend's wedding. I was laughing at something off camera, my hair blown across my face. Underneath, his message. She scrubs up well, doesn't she? Not bad for a council estate project. My throat closed. His sister had replied with a string of laughing emojis and, Mum's still not thrilled. She can do better, but at least this one won't rinse you. Cheap and cheerful. His response, exactly. She's good with money, basically training her to be a proper wife. She's just happy to be here. Just happy to be here, I scrolled further. Another chat. Different names. A woman from his office. I recognized her from stories he'd told. The work lot he swore he couldn't stand. Their messages were familiar. Flirty, then intimate, then worse than intimate, honest. He'd written a few weeks after our engagement, look, you know how it is. She's a starter wife. Stable, sensible, good with finances. The house goes in my name. I get the inheritance. Everyone calms down. Later on, when things are sorted, I can look at what I really want. Someone who actually fits my life. No rush. My vision blurred. I dropped the phone onto the sofa like it had burned me, then picked it up again because I needed to be wrong. I needed to read it twice and find some other meaning. There wasn't one. I clicked on a voice note from his mother I hadn't heard, buried further down his chats. Curiosity again. Always curious. Her voice filled the quiet room, clipped and disapproving. I sat there until the laptop went to sleep and the room went completely dark. The urge to march into the bedroom, shake him awake and throw every word I'd just read in his face was physical. My hands actually twitched. Instead, I closed the laptop gently. I put his phone back on the coffee table exactly where I'd found it. I straightened the cushion where I'd been sitting, like tidying the room could tidy my thoughts. Then I walked back to bed. He was snoring softly, one arm flung over my pillow. I stood there for a moment, looking down at him. The man I'd almost married. The man who saw me as a project, a starter wife, a means to an inheritance. I lay down carefully on the edge of the mattress, facing the wall. My body wanted to shake. I made it stay still, breath in, breath out. Small, controlled, quiet. He shifted in his sleep and tucked a hand against my back. Familiar, casual. I stared at the shadow of the wardrobe and felt nothing. Not anger, not love. Just a kind of hollow, watchful attention, like I'd stepped outside myself and was observing my own life from a corner of the ceiling. At some point before dawn, I made a decision. I would not scream. I would not throw things. I would not give him the performance he was expecting from a desperate, clinging girl. I would not be the story he told about me. The next morning I got up at the usual time. Showered, dressed, made tea. He wandered into the kitchen rubbing his eyes, kissed the top of my head like he always did. You were restless, he said, opening the fridge. Bad dream? Something like that, I replied. My voice sounded normal. That almost disturbed me more than anything. On the train, squashed between a man scrolling football news and a woman doing her makeup, I opened the Notes app on my phone and started a list. Not of what he'd done, of what I knew. Exact amounts transferred. Dates. Screenshots I'd need to take. Names of people involved. Mortgage broker, his mother, his sister, the colleague. Facts, not feelings. If I let feelings lead, I knew I'd just run. Leave the flat with a bin bag of clothes and start over somewhere else, poorer and still unseen. I'd spent years tidying up other people's mess in my job. Launches that had gone wrong, campaigns half thought out, budgets accidentally blown. You don't panic. You document. You understand the whole picture. Then you decide. So I treated my life like another damage campaign. At my desk, between meetings, I forwarded emails to my personal address. I exported PDFs of the mortgage documents, the gift declaration, the forms with his sole ownership ticked. I sent myself copies of his messages, attached them to an empty draft, left it sitting in a hidden folder. With every file I saved, the story sharpened. It stopped being this fog of betrayal and became something I could see clearly. a pattern of choices. His, not mine. The guilt didn't disappear, it just changed shape. He'd never forced me to give him my passwords. He'd never shouted. Everything he'd taken I'd handed him, piece by piece, wrapped in trust and the desire to be a team. Walking to get a sandwich at lunch, I heard my mum's voice in my head. "Don't make a fuss, love. It's only money. You'll scare him off if you're too serious about these things." Then my dad's, low and bitter from years of resentment. "You let people take the piss once, they'll do it forever." I ate my sandwich at my desk and stared at the spreadsheet on my screen. What did I actually want? Not his apology. I wouldn't believe it. Not his love. He'd told me, in his own words, that wasn't on offer. What I wanted was my life back. My money, my time, my version of events. I wanted to walk away without being turned into some cautionary tale his family told at dinner parties about that girl who tried to trap him. If I just left quietly, he'd get to keep all of it. The money, the narrative, the reputation. I'd be the unstable one who couldn't handle grown-up conversations about finances. Revenge for me started to look less like hurting him and more like refusing to carry his lies for him. That afternoon, I rang the bank from a meeting room, door closed, blinds half drawn. "I think my account's been compromised," I said. My voice shook a little. I let the woman on the phone interpret it as worry about fraud, not about my own judgment. There are transfers I don't recognize. Someone else had access to my login. It wasn't a complete lie. He had access, just not for what he'd used it for. She was kind, professional. She froze certain features on my account while they investigated. She explained the process, the forms I'd need to fill out. She suggested I change all my passwords and set up extra security. When I hung up, there was a small, hard knot of satisfaction in my chest. Legal, polite, boring even. But it was the first thread pulled out of the web he'd carefully woven. That evening, I emailed the mortgage broker from my personal address and CC'd his. Dear name. I reviewed the documents and noticed the ownership structure lists only his name as proprietor and refers to the deposit as a parental gift. I have not agreed to this and will not be proceeding on this basis. Please consider my participation in this application withdrawn until such time as the documents accurately reflect joint ownership and the true source of funds. Kind regards, Claire. I read it 3 times before sending it. No accusations, no drama, just facts, truth written down. I sat for a while after, staring at the sent notification, waiting for the wave of panic. It didn't come. What came instead was a strange, cautious calm. In the days that followed, I watched him. He had no idea anything had changed. He still talked about when we move, about tiles and paint colours, about how relieved his parents would be once everything was sorted. He still left his phone on the table, face down, when we ate. Still kissed my forehead absent-mindedly when he walked past. I responded, asked questions, nodded in the right places. I became softer around the edges, if anything, less opinionated, more agreeable. I stopped mentioning my job unless he asked. I downplayed upcoming projects. I made my world on the surface smaller and simpler. If he noticed, he took it as a good sign. The girl, just happy to be here, was stepping into her role. He told me one evening, almost proudly, that his parents wanted to meet me properly before the mortgage was completed. A dinner. Just us and them. Don't stress, he said. They can be a bit much, but if you're yourself, they'll come round. The old me would have fussed, Googled what to wear, practiced polite conversation in my head. The new me sat on the sofa, legs tucked under, and thought about the notes on my phone, the evidence folder in my email, the frozen account, the mortgage broker's very formal reply confirming material discrepancies and putting everything on hold. Of course, I said. I'd love to meet them. That night, lying in bed, I turned the words over in my mind. Council estate project. Starter wife. Doesn't need to know where she stands. I had spent my whole life trying to prove I wasn't what people assumed when they heard where I came from. Working harder, being quieter, being nicer, making myself smaller so other people could feel comfortable. Now for the first time, I saw a use for their assumptions. If they wanted a poor, naive girl, I could be her. I knew how to play that part. I'd grown up around people who genuinely fit their stereotype. Soft voice, nervous laugh, eyes wide, asking for guidance. Let them underestimate me. Let them see what they expect to see. Because underneath it, I would be watching. Listening, remembering. Revenge, I realized, wasn't going to be one big scene. No dramatic confrontation in a restaurant. No drink thrown in his face. That would end with me in tears on a pavement and him spinning the story before I got home. Revenge would be slower, smaller. Paperwork, screen captures, polite emails. Truth left in exactly the right places, with exactly the right people, at exactly the right time. I lay there in the dark and felt the anger press against my ribs like a wild animal. I could have let it loose. I could have turned the light on, woken him up, forced a confession, demanded answers he'd only twist. Instead, I put my hand flat on my stomach, breathed in, and held it in place. You don't have to destroy him, I told myself. You just have to stop helping him. Let him stand in the light of what he's actually done. When my phone buzzed with his message the next day, "Mum's so excited to meet you. Don't be nervous, XX." I stared at it for a long second. Then I typed back, "Can't wait. I'll be on my best behavior." And for once, that sentence meant something very different than he thought. I hope you know what you're doing. That girl screams trouble. Desperate, clinging. You need to protect yourself. Prenup. House in your name. Be polite, of course. She doesn't need to know where she stands. Where she stands. I sat there, in the half-dark of our living room, surrounded by the furniture I'd chosen, the cushions I'd bought on sale, the prints I'd carefully hung, listening to these people discuss my life like I was a risk to be managed. And for the first time, I realized I had no idea who I was to any of them. The laptop screen dimmed, waiting for me to move. I just stared at my reflection in the black glass. And for a long, long moment, I couldn't even remember my own face. They lived just outside the city, in a house that smelled of polished wood and old money. The kind of place where nothing cheap or impulsive ever seemed to enter. I wore a simple dress, the same one I used for work events when I needed to look presentable but unthreatening. On the drive over, he squeezed my knee and told me not to worry, that they'd come round once they saw how genuine I was. I nodded, kept my eyes on the road ahead, and practiced being smaller. At the door, his mother kissed my cheek politely. His father shook my hand, and his sister looked me up and down with thin curiosity. We sat around their table, silver cutlery, heavy glasses, the conversation skimming over safe topics at first work. The commute, the weather. I let my sentences trail off. I asked them questions about their lives instead. It took time, but eventually the subject turned, as I knew it would, to the house. His mother asked about timescales, his father mentioned the lending climate, and my fiancé began his rehearsed speech about acting quickly, about their generous support. I let him talk to himself comfortably. Then, when there was a natural lull, I smiled at his parents. "I just wanted to say thank you," I said quietly. "Not everyone would trust someone like me to handle the deposit, especially when it's coming from my account. It means a lot that you see us as a team." His mother frowned, just slightly. "From your account?" she repeated. "We haven't transferred anything to you." I tilted my head, as if confused. "Oh, that's odd. The mortgage documents referred to it as a gift from you. And the broker's email yesterday. I must have misunderstood." I let the sentence hang there. His father's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "We had a call," he said slowly, looking at his son, "from the broker, asking us to confirm funds we haven't provided." No one raised their voice. No one stood up. The room just shifted. My fiancé laughed, too quickly, said there must have been an administrative error, that he'd sort it first thing Monday. His mother's eyes stayed on me though, not him. "And the money?" she asked very calmly. "Where exactly did it come from?" I didn't look at him. "From my savings," I said, "over the last 7 years." I kept my tone light, apologetic. I assumed he'd explained. A long silence followed. Cutlery on china, the distant hum of the fridge. His sister looked down at her plate. No one pressed it further in front of me. They switched the subject, almost mechanically, back to work, to holidays, but there was a new distance in the way his parents addressed their son, a politeness where warmth had been. I answered their questions about my background simply, without trying to sell myself. Council flat, state school, part-time jobs. His mother studied me as if recalibrating something she'd been very sure of. When we left, she hugged me a little too tightly and held on a second longer than necessary. "Take care of yourself," she said. "Not of each other. Just me." On Monday, the mortgage broker replied, all to our last email chain, clarifying their position for all interested parties. The wording was careful. Concerns about the accuracy of declared gift funds, apparent use of one party's savings without documented consent, requirement to pause the application pending clarification. His parents were CC'd. So was I. So was he. No accusations, just a list of facts and regulations. That afternoon he messaged me from work, short and clipped. "Why did you email them? You're making this complicated." I didn't answer straight away. Instead, I forwarded that mortgage chain to his mother, along with screenshots of the transfers from my account and a brief line, "For transparency." She replied only once hours later. "Thank you. Nothing more. No apology. No explanation." But the next time he spoke to her on the phone, he did it in the bedroom with the door closed. His voice was low, urgent. When he came out, the colour had drained from his face. "They're pulling the gift," he said. "They think you've turned them against me." I didn't argue. I just opened my laptop, logged into my bank, and showed him the fraud investigation case number, the reverse transfers pending, and the note about unauthorised access under review. "The bank thinks you turned me against myself," I said quietly. A few days later, while he was at the gym, I drafted 2 more emails. The first went to HR at his company, attaching a carefully chosen selection of his messages to the woman from the office. I didn't editorialize. I simply wrote, "I'm not sure what your policy is on senior staff having this kind of relationship with a junior colleague, especially when it overlaps with client events. I thought you should be aware." The second went to his sister, and separately to his mother, from my personal account. 1 screenshot each. Council estate project. Starter wife. She's just happy to be here. Underneath, a single line. "This is how he talks about me when you aren't in the room. I thought it was only fair you had the full picture." I didn't send it in anger. By then, the anger had cooled into something else. A steady insistence on not holding his secrets for him anymore. I turned my phone face down and went to make tea. By the end of the week, the shape of his life had shifted in small but irreversible ways. The mortgage was officially withdrawn. His parents needed time to think about any future financial involvement. His colleagues stopped appearing in his stories. When I checked her social media, her profile picture had changed to something pointed about knowing your worth, and her relationship status was suddenly visible again. At work, he came home tight-shouldered, saying there'd been questions about professionalism and boundaries. No one shouted. No one had been accused. They just put his own words in front of him, one institution at a time, and asked him to explain. I didn't leave that night, or the next. I moved inside my own life like a guest, touching as little as possible, keeping my voice level, my footsteps soft. While he scrambled to fix things with the broker and his parents, I opened a separate account, moved my salary, and redirected my standing orders. I cancelled the joint wedding fund and asked each supplier, calmly and in writing, to amend the contract so that any remaining balance was in his name alone. After all, I explained, we'd used his card for the deposits. A woman at the venue rang to confirm, and, after a brief pause, offered her quiet sympathy in the pauses between her professional phrases. HR at his company called me once to clarify the timeline on the messages I'd sent. I answered each question factually, added nothing, speculated about nothing. "We appreciate your honesty," the woman on the line said. I hung up and cried in the bathroom at work, not from relief, but from the sheer weight of having every illusion catalogued and filed. When the bank's investigation concluded, they reversed most of the transfers. Not all, some they classified as authorised under duress of trust, which made me want to laugh and scream at the same time. But enough that the hole in my savings was something I could step over rather than fall into. They put a note on my account about shared access, advised extra security, gently implied I'd been naive. They weren't wrong. At his parents' house, the fallout was quieter but sharper. His mother emailed me once, a short message acknowledging receipt of the screenshots, saying they were deeply disappointed in his behavior and would be revising their arrangements accordingly. She didn't apologize for the things she'd said on that voice note, but she didn't defend them either. His sister went silent. The next time I saw her name was in a group chat we both belonged to, where she replied to someone's engagement news with a pointed, "Make sure you know what's in his emails before you sign anything." When I finally ended it with him, it was a Wednesday evening. I waited until he came home, watched him drop his bag, loosen his tie, complain about his day. There'd been a meeting with HR, ridiculous overreaction to things taken out of context, and then I asked him to sit down. My heart was hammering, but my hands were steady. I had a folder on the table neatly stacked, printouts of bank statements, mortgage documents, screenshots of messages, the email from the broker, the case number from the bank. I didn't theatrically push it across to him. I just rested my fingers on it. "I'm not doing this," I said. "The wedding, the house, any of it." He blinked, waited for tears, a wobble in my voice. When it didn't come, he went straight to the script. We could get past this. Couples have rough patches. I'd embarrassed him in front of his family. I was sabotaging both our futures. I listened. I let him talk himself in circles, hearing all the familiar lines he'd probably used on other people. When he paused, I spoke quietly. "I know about the transfers, the sole ownership, the messages to your family, the woman at work. I know what I was to you." He opened his mouth to deny it, then glanced at the folder and shut it again. The anger came then, but not the wild, plate-smashing kind I'd feared. It was smaller, meaner. He called me ungrateful, vindictive, said I'd overreacted by involving the bank, his parents, his job. "You've ruined everything," he said. "For what? Some moral victory?" I thought about that for a moment. "No," I said, "for accuracy." I'd already signed a new lease on a small flat closer to work, given notice to our landlord, arranged for the utilities in my name to be closed. I told him the move-out date, what I'd be taking, what he could keep. I told him I wouldn't be reporting him to the police for fraud, as long as he didn't try to claim any more money from me, or tell people I'd stolen from him. "If you lie," I added, still calm, "I have copies of everything. I won't argue with you. I'll just forward them to whoever needs to see them." He stared at me like he didn't recognize me. Maybe he didn't. For years I'd been the one smoothing, explaining, absorbing. Now I was just returning things to their rightful owners. The wedding unraveled in our absence. Mutual friends texted to ask if we were okay. I replied with a single message I drafted in my notes. "The wedding is off." I found out he'd used my savings without consent and misrepresented our finances to his family, the bank, and his employer. "I won't be discussing details, but I appreciate your concern." Some asked for more. I didn't give it. The facts were enough. They travelled on their own. Over the next few months, pieces of his new life floated back to me through people we both knew. There'd been no promotion. Instead, a development plan and loss of line management responsibilities. The colleague had requested a move to a different team and quietly let slip why when she'd had one glass too many at a leaving do. His parents, wary now, had set up a trust he couldn't touch yet, mentioned issues of judgment to a cousin who mentioned it to a friend who mentioned it to me. He'd moved into a smaller flat with a shorter commute and longer shadows. Once, I saw him by accident crossing the road near the station as I came out of a coffee shop. He looked older, not ruined, not broken. People like him rarely crack cleanly, but diminished, like someone who'd had to start doing his own paperwork for the first time and found it heavier than it looked. He didn't see me. I watched him for a moment, then turned and walked the other way, my hands warm around the cup I'd bought with my own card from an account only I could touch. People like to dress revenge up as drama, but in the end mine was boring. Forms, emails, clarified contracts, silence in the right places. No grand speeches, no public scenes. Just the slow, patient work of refusing to participate in a lie, of leaving his words where they belonged instead of carrying them for him. He'll tell his version of what happened for years, I'm sure, about the fiancé who went crazy, who overreacted, who couldn't let things go. That's fine. He can talk. All I did was stop shielding him, put the truth on the table and walk away. In the end, I didn't have to destroy him. I just had to stop protecting him from the truth.